Today, we enter the offseason here in the Miami Marlins franchise, here on MLB The Show 23. Last episode was Game 7 of the World Series. In case you missed that episode, you should probably watch it before coming here to the offseason. So in case you missed that episode, I will leave the card at the top right of your screen. Basically, Game 7 went like this. Here's Nick Fortes, lines this ball high and deep into left center. Back at the track, it's gone! Another home run for the Marlins. They've gone deep 4 separate times today. That's Fortes' 4th home run of the year, and it's now 5-1. Sandy Alcantara will come out of the bullpen. The doctors have allowed him to pitch. Rips it into center field. Robert can only watch it fly. Tampa Bay takes the lead. 3-run blast for Matt Thays, his 4th home run of the postseason. What a disastrous performance out of the bullpen by Sandy Alcantara. Count is full. 2 away, 1-run game. And Isaac Stu is going to tie it up! Launches it into left field! 19 years old, huh? Game 7 of the World Series, he ties it up, coming off the bench. 2-1 pitch. Franco ignites it into left field. Stu, after it, at the wall, it's gone! Wander Franco puts the Rays right back on top. Game over. Woody Landry hits it sharply up the middle. Franco, diving play, throw to first, in time! It's over! The Tampa Bay Rays have won the World Series. Yeah, we lost. Not ideal. This is a game that we should have won. We are up by 4 runs going into the 6th inning, and we blew it with a few mental lapses and a few bad decisions. We were unable to hold on to our lead, and thus we go back to the drawing board as we enter the most pivotal offseason in the series thus far. We played really well through the first 5 innings of Game 7. The offense was cooking. We had 4 home runs during that stretch. And Edward Cabrera, off of 3 days rest, was again brilliant, going 5 innings, allowing an early home run in the first inning. But other than that, he was dominant. Then we put Sandy Alcantara in the game, and then everything completely falls on its head. Sandy allows 5 runs, the offense shuts down, and the bullpen was very mediocre to finish off the game, obviously concluded by Johan Duran allowing a home run in the 9th inning by well-known child respecter Wander Franco. Shane Baz for the Rays did not even pitch well. He pitched great in Game 2, but here in Game 7, he was not very good, allowing the long ball 4 times, yet the Rays bullpen was able to close out the game. There's a few reasons why we ultimately lost this game, the first of which was obviously the decision to put Sandy Alcantara in the game. And throughout this series, Sandy has not performed very well in the postseason. However, this year, he had been pitching really well. He was supposed to get the start in Game 6, and he did, but he took a comebacker to the leg on the first at-bat of the game. So we decided to have him come in out of the bullpen in Game 7. Obviously, he did not pitch well. It sucks for him because that could be it for his Marlins career. He's a free agent at the end of the year, and if that's his last pitch as a Marlin, man, that would suck. Once Sandy was taken out of the game, the other pitchers really were not that much better. In the 8th inning, Griffin Jax let the bases become loaded. He had to be taken out, replaced by Johan Duran, who got the final out. We didn't allow any runs in the 8th, but Duran was off his groove because he had to come into the game earlier, and he allowed the home run in the 9th inning to Wander Franco. We acquired those 2 guys at the trade deadline to stabilize the bullpen, not lose us the World Series. And to make matters worse, the player who we replaced them with, Devin Williams, was the one who got the save in the bottom of the 9th inning. The other issue is that our offense was not clutch at all, and this has been an issue with this team since like episode 3 of the series. It's been a running joke for a while now that whenever we leave the bases loaded, we generally don't score. It's mostly been a joke, it's just sort of funny how often that's happened. But here in Game 7, we left the bases loaded not once, but twice. We also had a very untimely double play from Alec Boehm, who's like the one guy on this team who is clutch. Boehm ended up winning the playoff MVP. I feel like it should have been Luis Robert, who wasn't even in the top 3. while Radio Rosarena wins the playoff and World Series MVP, which is very well deserved. He's been great all October and was very good against us. So before we get into the offseason itself, I want to go through our studs and duds of the postseason. If you'd like to skip right into the offseason, I'll leave the timestamp in the description. But for those of you who would like to see our studs and duds for the playoffs, I decided to name 3 for each. And since this is only 1 month of action, everybody will either go up or down by only 1 rating. There's going to be extra emphasis put on the World Series, obviously, especially these later games. So if you performed well down the stretch and you were best when your lights were the brightest, then you have a better chance of going up, and obviously vice versa. If you struggled down the stretch and were not clutch and had opportunities with runners on base and failed or allowed too many big hits as a pitcher, then you're going to be going down. So let's start with our 3 studs of the postseason. These guys will each go up by 1 in terms of their rating and potential. And I really had 4 guys who I liked here, but I can only pick 3. The first of which is going to be Jesus Sanchez. When I was talking about guys who perform when the lights shine the brightest, I was referring to him. Over the last 3 games of the World Series, he went deep 4 times, including twice in Game 6, once in Game 7, led qualified players on our team in OPS, led in RBIs, tied for the lead in homers, second in WAR. He nearly caught Luis Robert right at the end. Him and Woody Landry would have been probably very tight for the World Series MVP had we won, but obviously that didn't happen. His rating and potential will go up by 1. He now has an A potential and might have made himself some money this October, being that he also is a free agent at the end of the year. Luis Robert will be our second pick. He's been the most consistent offensive player on the team throughout the postseason. He was a little more up and down in the World Series, but he did have 2 big hits in Game 7, and it's not like he was bad in the World Series or anything. He led the team in terms of position players in WAR throughout the postseason, and I think he's been more than good enough to deserve to move up by 1. He is now a 94, and he also is a free agent and possibly has made himself some money this offseason. Very common theme. Half of our roster is free agents, and no, that's not an exaggeration. So for the last spot, I was down to Woody Landry and Edward Cabrera. This is supposed to be an expectations-based award, so somebody like Edward Cabrera really has to exceed expectations and go above and beyond to get this award. But that's what Edward Cabrera continues to do. 36 innings pitched. The next highest on the team was 20. ERA of 2. WHIP barely above 1. He pitched twice in the World Series on 3 days rest and was dominant in both games, having 3 very solid starts. He led the MLB in postseason pitching WAR by a lot. Roki Sasaki was second in the National League. He had less than half of Cabrera's total at 1.3. Cabrera led in innings pitched for National League starters by a landslide. And then strikeouts. Look at this. He had 54. The next highest was 24. I think Edward Cabrera deserves a postseason Stud of the Year award here. Even though we expect him to be really good, I still cannot expect him to be this good. Since he already has 99 potential, all of his ratings will go up by 2 instead of 1 since we can't touch his potential. So he's now like a 102 overall, basically. Woody Landry ended up being the odd man out here. Woody was unbelievable in the World Series, hitting over 500, had 3 hits in Game 7. He had to have had 3 games with at least 3 hits in the World Series, went deep in Game 7 as well. The reason why I didn't pick him, though, is that he wasn't any good in the first 2 postseason series, had some bad defensive plays, wasn't very good offensively, and while it's great that he was so phenomenal in the World Series, he wasn't very good in the other 2 series, so that's why he is not one of our postseason Stud of the Years. Let's take a look at the postseason Dud of the Years now. We will start in the bullpen with Adonis Takadopoulos, who only threw 3 innings in 4 games, but it felt like whenever we had him pitch, he was pretty bad, allowing nearly 3 base runners per inning. He's been with the team for 4 years now, and I feel like he's just been super inconsistent. You don't know what you're going to get out of him, and here in the postseason, we got the bad version of him. So he'll go down by 1, down to a 79 overall. As for our second postseason Dud of the Year, this guy only played in the World Series, but Bo Bichette was abysmal. 4 for 26, albeit his hits were in pretty timely situations. Cannot say that about Game 7, though. He went 0 for 4 with 2 strikeouts. He swung at some terrible pitches. He was out at one point with the bases loaded. Had a negative .3 WAR in just 7 World Series games. He also had multiple really bad errors, including one in Game 3 that literally costed us the game. He really hasn't played all that well since the All-Star break, and after getting hurt and missing a month going into the World Series, he really struggled. He's also a free agent and possibly has lost himself some money with a really bad performance here in the World Series. As for the last spot, I am narrowing it down to Brian De La Cruz and Nick Fortes, and I kind of feel bad about this one because both of these players were awesome in Game 7 of the World Series. Fortes went 2 for 3, scored twice, and homered. De La Cruz reached base 4 times, including a home run of his own. However, both of these guys were not very good throughout the rest of the playoffs. Nick Fortes did hit for good power, 4 home runs total. His OPS was higher than De La Cruz, but he also hit 152. Not that De La Cruz's 196 is much better. Fortes did have a higher WAR because he plays catcher, but De La Cruz was pretty good defensively as well. We expect more out of Brian De La Cruz, and I'm more disappointed that his numbers were not good. But I just cannot look past the fact that Nick Fortes hit 150. At least Brian De La Cruz produced a little bit, and he was actually pretty good with runners on base, whereas Nick Fortes was 1 for 9 with runners in scoring position. He really hasn't been the same guy since Season 3 of the series, and he's going to go down in rating and potential by 1 again. He now only has 79 potential and is only an 80 overall. But it's a good thing he performed well in Game 7, so at least we had that. So now that the postseason studs and duds are concluded, we can hop into the most pivotal offseason of the series so far, and I'm excited to dive deep into why this offseason is so important. As if I haven't done that in like every episode this season, but that's besides the point. We will start with retirement, and luckily nobody in the organization is retiring. Some notable names around the league include Yusei Kikuchi, who was actually part of the Devin Williams trade with the Rays at the deadline. Jacob deGrom is done. His season 1 with the Rangers was unbelievable. Probably the only pitching season in this series that could rival what Edward Cabrera did this year. John Gray is in there, and then in terms of notable free agents, you got guys like Brad Boxberger, Matt Boyd, Mike Clevenger, CJ Cron, Wilmer Flores is done, DJ LeMahieu retires, Steven Matz, Nomar Mazara, Andrew McCutchen, Whit Merrifield, and then down the board even further, we have Hector Neris, Rougned Odor, Ozuna from the Braves, Marcell Ozuna, Christian Pache, Chris Sale could make a Hall of Fame case, former Marlin, Giancarlo Stanton. I wish we could have had Stanton on the team at some point during this series, but he was on an albatross of the contract, and it just never really would have been worth it. Michael A. Taylor, Ryan Tepera, Blake Trinan is done, and that's about it. Nobody ends up making the Hall of Fame. I feel like Jacob deGrom was probably snubbed. In his prime, he was unhittable, albeit he had a shorter career than most Hall of Famers. So now into the offseason, we have a lot of tough decisions to make with our exclusive rights free agents. Let's start with the easy decision. Jazz Chisholm's team option is accepted. So we have pretty much half of the roster not under contract for next season. And when I say half of the roster, I am not exaggerating. It is literally damn near half of our roster. As we take a look at the depth chart, all of the players with a money symbol next to their name are not under contract this year. That includes the entire starting outfield, Luis Robert, Brian De La Cruz, and Jesus Sanchez. In the infield, Ha-Seong Kim, Bo Bichette, and Alec Bohm. In the pitching rotation, we'll be without Sandy Alcantara and Jeffrey Springs. Edward Cabrera is the only reliable pitcher we have under contract next year. And then in the bullpen, Johan Duran, Jordan Hicks, Griffin Jacks, Paul Sewald, and Reynaldo Lopez has a team option. So that's 13 players who are not currently under contract. That's literally half of the roster. So we have a lot of decisions to make. We only have $69 million. Nice. Currently tied into the budget. And we only have 2 somewhat big contracts so far, Woody Landry and Edward Cabrera, who obviously deserve every penny. So we're going to be able to bring back a handful of these guys back on new contracts, but we're obviously not going to be able to bring everyone back. And a lot of these guys are going to ask for big deals. Sandy Alcantara, Luis Robert, and Bo Bichette are all going to ask for a lot of money. And these guys down the board like Duran, De La Cruz, Sanchez, etc., these guys are not going to be cheap either. Now that'll pose the question, who are we going to re-sign? And I think we're going to have to figure this out based on what we have with the rest of the roster. In terms of pitching, Edward Cabrera and Sandy Alcantara are the only guys who I really trust here, and maybe Max Meyer. We have a few really good young prospects, but that's what they are. Prospects. Can these guys jump into a pitching rotation right away? As we look at the infield, we have 3 key infielders not under contract next year, and we may need to rely on, once again, prospects. Aurelvis Martinez, Ariel Amador, and Khalil Watson are all potentially going to be vying for starting roles. Do we trust any of those guys? And then in the outfield, again, prospects. Kevin Alcantara has looked good in limited opportunities. Can he take on the full load? Pause. James Wood has had an up and down big league career, but he's done pretty well since we traded for him last year. But he is very unproven. We have to figure out which of our prospects we trust the most to replace players who were already on the roster, and those guys I might be a little bit more inclined to let go. We're going to offer the $21 million qualifying offer to Alcantara, Robert, and Bichette. I do not anticipate that any of these 3 guys accept it, but it's worth a shot, and if we lose them, we'll get a draft pick out of it. So my strategy here for trying to re-sign these guys is to lowball pretty much all of them. My thought process here is that if we can get as many of these guys as possible before free agency for cheap, that would be really nice because I want to be able to keep long-term financial flexibility. We're not going to offer these guys chump change per se. They're still going to get pretty big deals, but I want to see if we can offer them for cheap, and if not, I want to see what their markets ultimately end up looking like to figure out if we do want to pay these guys or not. I think this is a risky strategy, but I am confident that we should be able to bring a handful of these guys back. Reynaldo Lopez has a $3.5 million team option. We need all the money that we can get, but he was really good last year, and he's been really good for a while, so I would like to keep him. We're going to offer pretty much everybody here an extension with the exception of a few players. Ha-Seong Kim was pretty disappointing offensively this year, and he was a non-factor for us in the playoffs. Jeffrey Springs, I thought, had a good season, but he's 35 years old. He's regressing. I wouldn't mind getting younger in terms of the starting pitching. And then Reese McGuire is going to have to jerk him out of the park with a new team, as he will be hitting free agency as well. We have 3 open spots on the staff, and that starts with Geraldo Judd, who we're going to offer a 4-year contract to in order to be the new pitching coach. David Ross, a longtime Major League veteran and former Cubs manager, will get our offer to be the first base coach. And then we're going to look to bring back Tommy Lasorda, the best dead coach in all the land. So he will return as our third base coach for the next 4 years until he turns into a literal zombie. With that, it's time to simulate. We'll see if we get any luck having any of these players accept their deals. All 3 of the coaches accept, so that's good. But unfortunately, none of the players accepted, which is what I ultimately expected. Since MLB free agency moves so slowly, I'm fine with waiting to see how their markets go a little bit and try to make decisions based on that. So we will now enter the juicy part of the offseason, which features free agency. And obviously, there are a lot of Marlins in this year's free agency. We're going to keep everybody's offers for now, and we're going to wait and see how the market plays out, especially on these top guys, Alcantara, Robert, and Bichette. Realistically, I don't expect the top 3 guys to all be back. Maybe 1 or 2 of them return, but I'd be shocked if all 3 of them are back on the roster just because they're so expensive. We'll start with the not as exciting portion of the offseason. We're not going to add anybody to the 40-man roster. We want as many open spots on the 40 as possible, and there's nobody in the farm system who I'm really looking to move up right now, and nobody who I'm really all that scared of losing in the Rule 5 draft. Since so many guys are free agents, the good thing about that is there aren't many guys who are going to be free agents in the future. We only have 3 guys to offer arbitration to. Nick Fortes and James Wood would get offered arbitration, while Rob Refsnyder will be offered a cheaper 1-year contract instead. Most of our organization is going to be here in the tendering contracts. These are for guys with less than 3 years of Major League service, which includes pretty much all of our minor leaguers. None of the young guys here like Isaac Stu are going to get long-term extensions, because we just need as much financial flexibility for this offseason as we can get. This is going to be the busiest offseason we have in a while, so because of that, I want to make sure we have as much available cash as possible, and we can extend somebody like Stu long-term later. So the roster, as you can tell, looks a whole lot different. We have only 3 guys higher than 90 overall, and the depth chart is kind of the ghost town. I don't know how we're still the 7th ranked team in baseball. This is not a very good roster at all, but hopefully we're going to change that here in free agency with half of our roster currently being offered extensions. It's not just the entire Miami Marlins core, though, in free agency. There are a bunch of really good players in this class. Guys like Shane McClanahan, Adley Rutschman, a lot of really good relievers. Bobby Witt is getting offered $6 a year by the Royals. Okay, that's something. So let's try to figure out what we want to do in terms of all of our free agents first. Realistically, we're not going to get most of these guys to accept super small contracts, and I want to prioritize certain players and offer them bigger extensions now to try to get them early, and that will include Sandy Alcantara. And I understand why people would be a little bit hesitant on us bringing him back, but he is one of the best pitchers in baseball and has been for close to a decade at this point. I get he hasn't been great throughout the playoffs, but he was dealt a bad hand in Game 7, having to come into the game with an injury, and before that abomination, he had been playing well. I'm going to be willing to offer him a little bit more, 3 years, $87 million. The other two players I would like to prioritize are Brian De La Cruz and Jesus Sanchez. I think both of these guys are being undervalued in the market, and I would like to bring them back because both of them were really good last year. De La Cruz was our most consistent offensive player, and Jesus Sanchez has continuously gotten better and is a noted, phenomenal performer in the playoffs. I think bringing both of these guys back would be very beneficial for us, especially considering that neither of them are that expensive. De La Cruz only wants around $10 million a year, and Sanchez wants around $12. I think that's a bargain for the two of them. Obviously, De La Cruz and Sanchez aren't as good as some of these super high-level free agents, but they're not that far off, and they're going to make like half as much money. I think prioritizing re-signing Alec Bohm would also be a good idea. He had a career year with us last year, and he's like the one guy on this roster who I trust with runners in scoring position. We're going to look to give him a 1-year extension. I think Jordan Hicks would be another guy who would be beneficial for us to bring back. 2 years for $14 million. I think those are the big extensions I'm going to look to hand out now. As for everybody else, I'm going to wait to see how the market plays out. I'd still love to bring back Luis Robert or Bo Bichette if possible, but I want to see how their markets play out. Same with Johan Duran. Same with some of the other pitchers as well. What about the rest of free agency, though? I don't want to just potentially re-sign our players. I want to add to this roster, especially considering we're not going to be able to bring all of our guys back. I think we need to prioritize pitching, and luckily there's a lot of pitching in this free agency class. I'd like to go for some of these second-tier aces, and of this group of guys like Green, Mize, Severino, Musgrove, Steele, Ryan, Woodruff. I think there's some good choices, especially with Casey Mize and Luis Severino. Both of these guys are coming off of career seasons last year. They were both contenders for the AL Cy Young, and I think having one or both of them added to the rotation would be very beneficial, especially if we're not able to bring a guy like Sandy Alcantara back. So we're going to offer them both 3-year deals, and both of those contracts have gone above their current teams. I think it would make sense to add to the bullpen as well, and there's a lot of good relievers. Diaz, Bautista, the other Diaz. What about Emmanuel Clase, though, who's been one of the best relievers in baseball really since he got to Cleveland? We know about him very well from our Guardians franchise last year, and I think it'd be a lot of fun to pair him up with Camilo Doval once again. Those two were a lethal duo in the Guardians franchise last year, and we might be able to reunite them right here. A slightly less exciting reliever, who still I think is going to be a pretty good addition, would be lefty Brett Martin, who's coming off a great season with the Reds. He's been really good for them over the last 4 years. And then I want to add another platoon bat to the offense, particularly somebody who hits lefties well. I think Ketel Marte would be a good addition, a solid veteran who can play a lot of positions. He wasn't very good last year with the Nationals, but I think as a bench bat, he could be pretty good. We are really reuniting the core from the Guardians franchise last year. We already have Jesus Sanchez and Camilo Doval. We're looking to add Emmanuel Clase and Ketel Marte. What's next? Are we going to trade for Jose Ramirez or something? So these are all of our contract offers, and I know there is a lot of them. We're not going to be able to sign probably most of these players, but I want to put as many eggs into as many baskets as possible just so we don't completely strike out through this offseason. So we're going to start by simulating, and immediately, Sandy Alcantara is no longer interested in our contract offer. The market for Sandy Alcantara has heated up very fast. The Red Sox, Yankees, and Braves have all given him very lucrative contract offers, and now we've got to make a decision. Do we want to stay on this bidding war or go for slightly lesser options like Mize and Severino? I think people might disagree with this, but I want to stay in this bidding war. I think Sandy Alcantara is too good of a player to lose, and if we can bring him back, we need to. The problem is he's not interested in any of our contracts, and I'm willing to give him potentially an overpay for 5 or 6 years, but he just does not seem to be willing to budge. I think what Sandy Alcantara wants is to be the clear ace of a staff on a big market team, and we cannot provide him either of those things. Miami, in the grand scheme of the MLB, is a small market, and obviously he's not our ace here. It sucks because he's been such a great player for this team for so long, and I really wanted him to redeem his playoff struggles. But if he's not willing to consider a 7-year, $210 million offer from us, which is more money than any of the other teams have given him, then I don't think there's any way we can bring him back. And I think Sandy Alcantara is going to be on a new team next year. I do have some good news, though. Jesus Sanchez has immediately accepted his extension, so he's back. That's nice. Now that it looks like Sandy Alcantara won't be back next year, we're going to have some more money to play around with for guys like Luis Robert and Bo Bichette. I'm not going to touch their contracts yet, but once they start to get more of a market, we will add to the bidding war accordingly. As we continue to simulate, Griffin Jack signs a 1-year deal with the Rangers. It looks like the market for Emmanuel Clase has grown quickly, and since we're not paying Sandy Alcantara, it looks like I'm going to be willing to give Clase a fat bag. The same can be said for Johan Duran. I don't expect both Clase and Duran to accept, but I think it would be good to put our best foot forward for both of them. Sandy Alcantara has picked his new home. He signs a 5-year, $150 million deal with the New York Yankees. So Alcantara will be the ace of the Yankees, and he's going to get what he wants. He will be the ace of a staff for a big market team. Well, one of those things might not be true. Obviously, the Yankees are a big market, but he might not be the full-on ace because they also signed Alek Manoah on the same day for a 7-year deal. Could this be a Cabrera-Alcantara issue all over again? The replacement for Sandy Alcantara in Miami will be Casey Mize. He signs his 3-year, $45 million deal. This contract is better value than Sandy Alcantara's, even if Sandy is 1,000% the better player. Casey Mize for $15 million a season is a bargain. Felix Bautista, by the way, signs with Minnesota, so they get their Johan Duran replacement as they have a new all-star closer. Speaking of Johan Duran, he agrees to his 3-year extension and is now back. So far, we've signed Mize, Duran, and Sanchez. Just because we've signed Johan Duran, though, doesn't mean I'm going to take my offer off of Emmanuel Clase, and the same can be said with Luis Severino's deal. If teams are going to overpay these guys, I'll be happy to take my offers off, but with Sandy Alcantara now gone, we're going to need as much pitching help as we can get. So I'm going to keep my offers on these two for now. No new activity with Luis Robert or Bo Bichette, so I'm going to hang tight with them. After simulating a little bit more, a few of the relievers would accept their deals. Brett Martin accepts. Paul Sewald is back, so both of them will be in the bullpen for next season. Still nothing new with Robert or Bichette or anybody, as a matter of fact, as our list of players we're negotiating with goes down. Adley Rutschman signs an 8-year deal with the Texas Rangers. I'm a little bit surprised by that, but the Rangers are a contending team, so I get it. They want to add as much talent as they can. And Jonah Heim may be now as somebody who finds himself on the trade block. Emmanuel Clase is a Marlin. 4 years, $54 million. This bullpen is about to be filthy. I definitely did not go into the offseason with the plan of signing Johan Duran and another big-time reliever, but we did, and now we hit the Avengers in the back end of our bullpen with the two of them and Camilo Duvall. We got some more good news with a few other players signing deals. Brian De La Cruz is officially back for the next 3 years, and Jordan Hicks is back for the next 2. So our list of players who have been signed goes up. We still have plenty of money left in the budget, over $60 million. Bo Bichette's market has opened up now, and the Padres are on the board. They offered a 6-year, $150 million deal. I'm a little bit hesitant on giving Bo an extension after him really performing poorly after the All-Star break. and obviously he was a train wreck in the World Series, but I think it would be in our best interest to at least give it a shot. We're going to up the offer to $100 million over 4 years, which is pretty much the same amount of money that the Padres are giving him per season. He seems a little bit more interested in our deal. The roster is really starting to come together now. The pitching's looking pretty good. The offense, we're bringing some guys back. Still have a few more to go. As we get to the end of the qualifying offer period, Luis Robert and Bo Bichette both say no, unsurprisingly. I'm going to make an edit to Luis Severino's deal. I didn't realize he was 34, to be brutally honest, so I'm going to give him 2 years instead of 3 years, but for a little bit more money. The Cardinals are going to offer as a trade. They want Austin Wells and would be willing to give us Salvatore Russo, who looks like a solid pitching prospect, but I think Austin Wells is a pretty good backup catcher. I'm going to say no. Alexis Diaz signs with the Texas Rangers, so they add some more pieces. They were only 2 games away from making the World Series last year. The Astros see them making moves, and they sign Ozzie Albies, stealing him away from Atlanta. The Mets add Dylan Coleman to the bullpen on a 4-year deal. The Red Sox get a new big-time ace with Reed Detmers coming over from the Angels. And then the Cardinals get their catcher after all. They tried to get Austin Wells. They'll settle for Danny Jansen instead. Luis Severino is a Marlin, 2 years, $31 million. So our pitching now all of a sudden looks really nice. Yes, we did lose Sandy Alcantara, but we signed Casey Mize and Luis Severino for pretty much the same amount of money. And now we're going to have a wide open competition for the final 2 spots in the rotation over spring training to see who joins Cabrera, Mize, and Severino. The Luis Robert market is opened up now, and the Brewers are in play with a 7-year deal for $175 million. So we're going to send a bigger offer in 5 years for $136. We're not going to have enough money for both Robert and Bichette. Maybe we get one of these guys. Maybe we get none of them. As we take a look at a big trade here, interdivision with the AL Central, the Guardians acquire Eloy Jimenez from the Chicago White Sox. I think that's a great value deal for Cleveland. The Blue Jays add Joe Ryan to the rotation, 3 years. Tanner Houck will join the White Sox bullpen for the next 6 years. Luis Robert signs with the Brewers, 7 years for $175 million. Wow, okay, that's interesting. The Brewers are not exactly a contender. Their ace is Zach Plesac. Not ideal, but they have a pretty good lineup. And now Luis Robert is going to be the face of the team for the next 7 years. I definitely feel bad about losing Luis Robert because he was so good last year. In the regular season, he was phenomenal. In the playoffs, he was great. But I can't say I feel all that bad about not giving him $175 million because he consistently has not been able to stay on the field. He's only played over 100 games twice and really hasn't put all of his talent together until this year. I hope that he's able to keep it up now in Milwaukee, and I would have loved to have had him back. He's been one of my favorite players on the team over the last few years, and trading for him has ended up being a massive success, and he's going to sign a big deal with Milwaukee. We do have some good news, though. Alec Boehm is back. He signs a 1-year extension, and he returns. So now there's only 2 players left who we're offering contracts to, Bo Bichette and Ketel Marte. Let's simulate through the draft lottery now. This obviously does not affect us. We do not have a lottery pick, considering we made the World Series. As the 55 win, Colorado Rockies will pick number 1 overall. The Athletics, Royals, and Reds move up. That'll now bring us into the Rule 5 draft. Obviously, we've lost a lot of pieces in the offseason, so I went into the Rule 5 draft with an open mind, but there was nobody I wanted, so we're not going to pick anybody, and we didn't lose anybody, which is good. We've got a trade offer here from the Twins, and it is a big one. They're offering us Cal Quantrill for Tyrell Berry and Jacob Berry. I'm now just realizing those 2 have the same last name. Anyway, Cal Quantrill's been one of the best pitchers in the AL for a while. Last year, he was unbelievable. I'm going to say no, but I'd be lying if I said that was not tempting. We're now in January. This is the quiet part of the offseason, so we'll look to move quick. Ryan McMahon is a Dodger. Justin Steele's a Giant. Bo Bichette is a Cardinal. Whoa, okay. The St. Louis Cardinals jumped out of nowhere, and they steal away Bo Bichette from us and San Diego. So Bichette and Gavin Lux will reunite in the middle of the Cardinals infield. Lux, by the way, was really good last season. So Bo Bichette is gone. I really thought for most of the year that we were going to lock up Bo Bichette, but he was just not good down the stretch, and that's why we were a little bit hesitant on making him a priority. Of the top 3 free agents we had going into the offseason, Alcantara, Robert, and Bichette, none of them are back. I would have figured that one or two of them would have, but we don't re-sign any of them. And I think it's A-okay because our roster still looks really good. We improved the pitching, we improved the rotation, we improved the bullpen, and we brought back most of our other position players like Sanchez, De La Cruz, and Bohm. I think it's better to put our eggs into a lot of different baskets rather than just a few. Some late free agent signings here include Benintendi to the Diamondbacks, Brandon Woodruff to the Rays, that's a pretty good deal. Nolan Arenado signs for cheap with Seattle, and Jose Altuve leaves the Astros. He signs for cheap with the Cincinnati Reds. Bobby Witt signs for hella cheap with the Mets, which I kind of understand. He has a career WAR of 2.5 in 6 seasons in Kansas City. That's really low. Maybe he'll rebound with the Mets. Steven Kwan is a Padre for only $13 million a year. Going into the offseason, he was asking for like over 20, and he gets way less than that, which surprises me. I would have figured there would have been more of a market for him. So now that Kwan is off the board, all of the big free agents are gone. Ketel Marte, by the way, has signed with us, so he is now on our team, and our free agency is complete. We still have to go through arbitration, which the panel will side with James Wood and Nick Fortes. They will both see an increase in salary. We have $174 million tied up in players, so that means we still have plenty of money left in the budget, which is important because we still have guys like Jazz Chisholm who we have to pay in the future. Overall, I think we've had a really good offseason so far. We've really improved the pitching. The rotation looks nice. The bullpen looks nice. I don't know about the offense, though. We lost Luis Robert and Bo Bichette, and we haven't replaced them with new pieces. So I wanted to look at the trade market. The Giants have Tyler Stevenson, who's really good, one of the best catchers in baseball. And they also have MJ Melendez, who's the backup. Melendez only played around half the games last year, but when he played, he was damn good. In 222 at-bats, he went deep 22 times. Walk-to-strikeout ratio was about even. He hit .342, slugging over 700, OPS at nearly 1150, and he had a WAR of 5. If he had played the whole year, his WAR would have been above 10. That's ridiculous, and the Giants cannot get this guy on the field. So I think upgrading from a guy like Nick Fortes with MJ Melendez would be a big addition. Fortes hasn't been the same guy for 2 years now. The one problem with this is that Melendez is going to cost a lot, and the Giants aren't going to want Nick Fortes because they already have Tyler Stevenson. The offer that I put into Trade Finder is just too much. I'm not willing to trade Isaac Stu. That's a no-go. I looked at some other options. I think Jonah Heim could certainly work. He's obviously not as good, but he is one of the better catchers in the league, and he's definitely available. The Rangers just signed Adley Rutschman to a giant deal, so I can understand them wanting to move off of Heim for some pieces. The Cubs with Corey Lee could be an option as well. I think both Heim and Lee are good substitutes for somebody like MJ Melendez who might be an overpay. I really want Melendez, though, because I think he's going to be really good. So my plan is to make a few trades, try to accumulate some assets, and go from there. We'll start with Nick Fortes. He is on the move to the Angels. They did sign Reese McGuire, ironically, but they need a true starting catcher, and I think Nick Fortes can be their guy. They're also going to get Zach McCambley and Norel Gonzalez, while we will acquire 2 prospects. 20-year-old shortstop Lamont McGill is the first of which. They have a couple good shortstops already with Zach Neto and Leonzo Bailey. And then Geronimo Gonzalez, a 23-year-old right-handed starting pitcher, is the next piece. Both of these guys have 85 potential, and I think they're both going to be very solid players down the line. Nick Fortes is gone. He's been here since day one. I've really enjoyed having him. His last game, he was unbelievable in Game 7 of the World Series, but I've got my sights set high on catcher with one of Corey Lee, Jonah Heim, or MJ Melendez. Particularly with Melendez, I think we're going to have to give the Giants a really good pitcher, and I could see the Orioles wanting to move off of Grayson Rodriguez. He's on the last year of his deal. They're giving Trevor Rogers and Tristan McKenzie a lot of money already. Now, we have to give a lot to make this work. That's going to start with Yuri Perez. The Yuri Perez roller coaster is done. We are stopping the ride. He has not been good for us over the last 4 years, and I think it's time to move on. He needs a fresh start. He needs to go somewhere new. Adonis Takadopoulos is also in the deal. He's just been very inconsistent for us, and I would rather more proven veterans in the bullpen, and then Derek Chavis is just a throw-in. It's basically Perez and Takadopoulos, 2 slightly underperforming players for another underperforming arm in Grayson Rodriguez, but the Giants really like him, and I think that could be enough to get this deal done. I put MJ Melendez back into the trade machine, and sure enough, we have a deal. The reason why this had to be so complicated is because the Giants wanted a really good pitching piece. I was not willing to give up Robbie Jones or Tyrell Berry. I thought I was going to have to budge on one of them, but thankfully we were able to get 2 other teams involved, and we're able to facilitate Grayson Rodriguez going to the San Francisco Giants as the big piece they'll get. The Giants will also get Lamont McGill, who we just acquired from the Angels. I like Ariel Amador a lot more. I would rather keep him as our potential shortstop, and then no Toribio is in as a throw-in. I think this deal is going to be a really big risk for us because MJ Melendez has a very weird skill set. He's inconsistent against righties, but he mashes against lefties. He has great plate discipline. He's a clutch hitter, and I think it's worth the risk. And now we have one of the most talented catchers in baseball on our roster. Now, Melendez is a free agent at the end of the year. Him and Jazz Chisholm are both going to be asking for big extensions. I would imagine possibly north of $200 million each. And so we're going to have some tough decisions to make, but let's not worry about that right now. We have made all of the moves for the offseason, and we are now into season number 6. I said this roster was going to change significantly, and boy, I wasn't lying. We lost a lot of pieces. Sandy Alcantara is a Yankee. Bo Bichette is a Cardinal. Luis Robert is a Brewer. Our top 3 free agents all gone. We also lose Griffin Jacks to the Rangers, Jeffrey Springs also to the Brewers, and Ha-Seong Kim replacing Ozzie Albies in Atlanta. Although we lost those guys, we did retain Johan Duran, Jordan Hicks, Reynaldo Lopez, Alec Bohm, Brian De La Cruz, and Jesus Sanchez. Obviously, the exciting part of the offseason, though, is the new additions that we made. We added a lot to the pitching, adding Casey Mize and Luis Severino into the rotation, and then in the bullpen, we added Brent Martin and Emmanuel Clase. The big move right at the end of the offseason was trading for MJ Melendez from the Giants as our new catcher, replacing Nick Fortes, who is now with the Angels. We've got some fun position battles to go through in spring training, in the rotation, in the outfield, and in the middle infield. Along with that, we'll go through the opening portion of the season in the next episode, and I'm excited to debut our new Miami Marlins team. Let me know what you thought of our offseason down below. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say about all of our roster moves. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.